KCAA.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And as a reminder, you can follow us on both Instagram and Facebook. Just go to Viewpoint with Father John. And if you miss a show, you can pick it up on YouTube, usually a couple hours after we go off air, but it's there permanently. Just when you go to YouTube, in the search bar, put Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and you can catch the shows all the way back for 2 years. So I'm very excited about that. And, it's nice to be able to listen whenever you want to listen and not be bogged down to just one time. And I thank you for those of you who've been subscribing to the YouTube channel. It helps the show. And it's nice getting some of the comments that you make on the videos. By the way, speaking of videos, I started talking about this last week that I'm working on doing some Facebook. I started to say FaceTube. That's going to be a new cartoon series, I'm sure. But on Facebook Live, 1 or 2 times a week, just doing a short little lecture thing that if you want to tune in and catch just for some positive thoughts and such. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, as I try to remind you every week, if you're looking for a really great pharmacy with a pharmacist that really cares, I personally recommend Claremont Pharmacy in the city of Claremont. It is on the corner of Arrow Highway and Indian Hill Boulevard. Dr. Nikki Ho is the proprietor there. And, they take good care of their people. You're not just a number with some big chain. She takes care of you individually. And the staff there is really sweet people. I get all my prescriptions done there. One reason's not just because they're nice people. I go there because they get it right. And when I have some refills coming up, which as a diabetic is quite often, they remind me. And they take care of all the communications with the doctor and everything, so I just don't have to worry about it. So, again, Claremont Pharmacy in the city of Claremont, be sure to stop by there. With this pandemic, every week we start the show with the latest numbers. And for those of you who don't think that this is real, you think it's a hoax, well, we have 1.2 million confirmed cases just in the United States. And as of just when I was going on air tonight, the current death toll just in the United States, 76,513. Among these is my niece's husband, who died on Sunday. Now, let me tell you, he's in his 30s, didn't have underlying medical issues. He was dead within 3 weeks. He went in and they couldn't figure out what blew his liver out. He doesn't drink. Suddenly his liver shut down. And it turns out it was COVID-19. And then, of course, it spread to the lungs. And they finally took him off the respirator on Sunday and he died. So, look, kids, this is not a joke. If you have someone telling you that it's a hoax, they're idiots. There's no other way of putting it. They're idiots. If by now they don't understand the seriousness of this pandemic, then there's something very wrong with them. And that may not be politically correct, but we're talking about people dying here. And I know there's been a lot of protests for people saying they have a right to get a haircut and all this stuff. Well, we have a right to not be infected by you because you want to get a haircut. All right? So that being said, I'd like to introduce our guest tonight, who's a very dear friend of mine and a good friend of the show. In fact, he's our official fill-in host when I'm out of town. And that's Dr. John Smith, who is the author of The Authentic Man, A Guide to Happiness and Purpose. And he just put out a wonderful video for social model recovery, which I posted on my personal page, and I'll see if I can get it transferred to the show page as well, on how to deal with, what we're having to cope with in this issue. If you're having feelings of anger like I'm having right now, because not just from being cooped up, because I'm not as cooped up as some, because I still have to go out and do funerals. Yes, if you don't think it's real, I'm doing a lot of funerals for people with COVID already. So, Dr. Smith, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Can you hear me okay? This is kind of weird for me. Usually I'm sitting right next to you in the studio, so tonight I'm calling in on the telephone and sitting in my kitchen while I sit here with the show, so hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can hear you. It's a little low on my
Okay.
end, but that's okay. I can turn my headphones up. That doesn't mean you're low on the airways. It just means my volume's too low. But it's good to hear you. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, so this has been something else. I've been working from home since about the middle of March, and I'm blessed with the ability to do that. As you know, I work for Social Model Recovery Systems. I'm their Director of Education and Training, but also I'm a professor at Mount San Antonio College in the Addiction Studies program. So both of those jobs have me working from home, and everything at the moment is being done online. So I'm not the techiest guy in the world, so it's been quite a transition for me, but I feel good that I'm able to work from home and blessed that I can stay safe and keep my family safe because I'm not bringing in that much exposure unless I go out to the store or something like that.
Well, I heard rumor that it's doubled your workload because you have your work for these agencies and then you have your honey-do list. And you're
Oh
home.
my gosh, that is so true. And I don't think she's listening right now. Today was a good example. I'm sitting outside after dealing with two things from each job and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And she looks at me and says, what are you going to clean today?
Did you tell her to bomb with a glass of iced tea you're having?
I said I'll clean tomorrow, but that didn't go over so well. So we have a wonderfully clean kitchen and a wonderfully clean floor because after I got done with other business, I took care of that. And she's happy and I'm happy and it's over and it's done, and at least until the next job comes along.
Well, I think I saw that movie. Isn't I'll Cry Tomorrow?
That's what it felt like. That's what it felt like today, for sure.
Oh, I can believe it. Well, you sent me a wonderful video this afternoon, which I put on my page, and I did watch it, believe it or not. I saw it on my phone. And you make some really good points in there, and I was hoping we can go through some of those during the show tonight. Now, I already gave my rant, so you got to hear that I need what you're saying in that already.
Yeah. Well, you did, and I appreciate your rant. I feel the same way. It just bothers me that, I understand everybody wanting to get out. I understand everybody wants to, exercise their right to freedom, although as a medical professional working in the healthcare field, I see the other side that a lot of people either don't see or they don't think it's truthful or they don't care. And it scares the heck out of me because you can exercise your freedom, but then your freedom may have an effect on several other people who can't protect themselves. So it bothers me, and that's my politically charged, incorrect or correct statement, but it just bothers me. But nonetheless, I think everybody, and maybe this is what we're seeing is a fallout from that. Everybody's overwhelmed.
Yes.
Everybody's overwhelmed, and since this is, I keep hearing the darn word unprecedented, and it is. We've never seen anything like this in our lifetime. And,
True.
So nobody really knows how to react, how to respond. We're bombarded daily with information, some of it truthful, some of it not.
Right.
But we're all operating in a vacuum. Some of us are in a great deal of fear and have a lot of anxiety. Some of us have a lot of anger going on. So anger and fear, basically, if we boil that down, what we're in is fight or flight.
Right.
We're in a state of emergency.
And I'm going to touch on that for just a second. I know I'm interrupting you, and I'm sorry for that.
No. I can't see you, so go ahead and do what you got to do.
Well, this week on Facebook, of course, not exactly the best site. Somebody was going on, one of the people I was talking about, and calling this stuff a hoax and everything. And they wrote this quirk, and I wanted to block them afterwards, so I didn't say something I would have to do a disclaimer, or NBC would make me write a sorry note to later.
Yeah.
But he said, fear is a sin. And I want to dispel this for a second. It's not fear to follow science. It's not fear to use good sense. It's not fear to practice good health and be considerate of others. And so I just want to throw that out there because I think a lot of people are mistaking that for fear, or people who don't want to accept what's going on. They call it fear when, just like we have good caution that we don't put our hand in a fire. That's just good sense. Okay?
Makes sense, yeah.
So,
well, I'm sure you've heard this in many spiritual practices, and I'm a believer of this myself. It's kind of a spiritual idea, is that we can either come from a place of love or we can come from a place of fear.
yes.
In fact, in my book, I even talk about that. And I know that when I come from a place of love, I have more compassion. I'm more at peace. I have more clarity. And when I come from fear can come up, and anger and fear are sort of first cousins. So
Yes.
sometimes my fear shows up as anger, and sometimes my fear shows up, just as that, anxiety or fear. And, when I'm in that state of mind, it really keeps me from being present. It keeps me from connecting with others. It keeps me from handling things appropriately. So I don't know how to say it even more appropriately, but just people need to get back to a state of love, being compassionate.
Yes.
As an example, just a quick example, you'll appreciate this because I know we live near one another. I started going on a daily walk, which has been a wonderful effect. I'll talk about that in a minute as a coping skill, but I've been going on a walk. I've been doing about an hour a day, which has been just amazing. Being outdoors, being in nature, it's not total nature, but there's trees and there's birds and there's squirrels, and it's not, I'm not in the big city, so it's not horns honking and all of that. So I'm out going for a walk, and as I'm walking down one of the streets, I won't name the name of it, but you'll know it. I'm looking, and in the gutter and all around on the side of the street is just, I can't tell you how much trash and litter there is, and it's mostly fast food packages and fast food wrappers and bags and just junk that people, and Starbucks cups and things that people have thrown out of their cars, and it just makes me sick to my stomach to think that these people who are throwing this stuff out couldn't have kept that and taken it in and put it in a trash can or a trash bag. They just threw it out like they don't care, and that really bothers me. So one of the things that I would advise as part of the coping strategy, and I'm kind of going around the boat here, but one of the things I would advise is being of service. So what my intention is, and my commitment, without anybody telling me I have to, without anybody saying you should, or without anybody watching, I'm going to take a trash bag and I'm going to go walking and I'm going to clean that crap up, even though nobody's telling me I have to.
Nice. You're being part of the solution.
And I'm being part of the solution. I'm going to feel better. It's going to be a service to the community. I can't understand why people are doing what they're doing, but okay, everybody's acting a little crazy right now, so it is what it is.
It's a wonderful idea. It really is. It's funny that you say that because 2 weeks ago, Gabby and I were in the parking lot of the radio station, and someone who works for one of the local stores was walking in front of us. We're in the car. He opens up his package of what he's going to eat, and he just very deliberately threw the wrapper on the ground. So my window was open. I said, "Excuse me, do you mind not littering our town?" And he was really shocked. He didn't know I was sitting there. And of course, I was in collar, so I threw a little extra guilt his way. And he picked it up real quick, but you could tell he was angry that he got caught. And as he went to throw it away, I was like, well, hey, this is all of our community, kids.
Right, exactly.
I'm surprised.
Well, you bring up a good point, because maybe what it is, if I'm being psychological for a minute, is that people not only are afraid, I said people are angry.
Yeah.
But people can't necessarily express their anger without being violent, or with, who are they going to express it to? They're angry at who? God? They're angry at the universe. They're angry at COVID-19. They're angry at the governor. They're angry, they can't express it directly. So maybe what they're doing is the trash is an example of expressing things passive aggressively, which drives me crazy, but a lot of people express their anger in what we call passive aggressive, meaning that it's kind of sideways. I'll throw the trash out. That's my expression of the heck with you, anger, as opposed to expressing it directly to somebody. I'm really angry at you.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of anger, Frank is looking at me through the glass that if we don't go to commercial right now, the station's going to be really angry with all of us.
Oh, no.
And so to keep Frank in good stead with the management, we'll be back in 90 seconds.
Thank you.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292FQ Riverside, and K293CF Moreno Valley.
Here's the legend of Mountain Mike's Pizza. There's a tale the early settlers tell that while panning for gold just below San Francisco near the Redwoods, a unique discovery was made. Not just gold in the ground, but the golden smell of Mountain Mike's Pizza and their fresh homemade pepperonis. A taste the 49ers from all over California couldn't pass up. It was pizza from the mountaintop, pizza the way it ought to be. Since 70+8, Mountain Mike's has been dishing up pizza dough rolled fresh daily using real whole milk mozzarella with mouth-watering, delicious fresh ingredients, including their legendary crisp, curly pepperoni that makes their pizza sought after like the gold of the 1800s. Now, Mountain Mike's has come to Redlands, located in the Redlands Packing House District near Sprouts. Feed your family for the holidays at mountainmikespizza.com or 909-335-1133. That's 909-335-1133, and discover this pizza gold for yourself. Google Mountain Mike's Redlands.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere in the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed, and a quick shout out to the best sound engineer in the business, our buddy Frank. Hey, Frank, how's Odie doing? I hope you don't mind me asking on air. Odie's his cat that's 20 years old, and it's just a beautiful cat. And has been struggling the last few days. So what's going on?
His back leg stopped working right, and we thought we were going to have to put him down, but then I noticed he was still able to hobble over to the litter box and hobble to his food bowl, and he still purrs and plays with strings. So we decided it's not his time, even though he's 20 years old. He still has at least, hopefully, a few weeks or maybe more, hopefully.
Well, Gabby tells me the same thing. As long as I can hobble to the litter box, I'm okay. So we're keeping Odie in prayer. Yes, we pray for animals here because animals are part of the family.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know that, maybe you need to warm up your heart a little bit. So anyhow, my guest this evening is Dr. John Smith, one of my dear friends and certainly one of my heroes. And if you want a really good book to read, I recommend his book, The Authentic Man, A Guide to Happiness and Purpose, which I've read a number of times, and I've given away copies of it as a therapist because I think there's such great imperatives in there. And I don't just give this book to men. I give it to women too because there's information that translates very well. And sometimes women could use this information when they're dealing with a man who's struggling as well, or if they're struggling. And those of you watching on YouTube or Ustream, the picture of the book cover is on your screen at this time. So, Dr. Smith, we were talking about your walk when we went to commercial and some of the things you can do. You're being proactive, being part of the solution, doing something you're not asked to do, but just doing it because it's part of doing something that's right.
Yeah. So what I said in that particular statement was that while I was doing that, one, because I was angry what was happening, it was a way for me to discharge some of that emotion. Yeah. But two, it was an act of service. Nobody's telling me I have to do it. Nobody's requiring it to be done. I could just sit there and complain about somebody doing it, but I am intentionally going to take a trash bag and something to pick up stuff with and wear some rubber gloves and go out and on my walk I'm going to do my best to pick up all of that trash. I'm sure that it will replicate itself at some point, but at least I will feel confident and feel good about what I did.
Well,
and nobody's looking, so I'm saying it now, of course, but nobody's looking, so if I do it, nobody cares, but I do care.
Well, it reminds me of a couple of stories I learned in seminary. One's about this guy who every day he'd go into his backyard and talk to God, and he had these great conversations. One day he goes out there and he's very upset. He says, God, there's this famine, there's child abuse, there's murders, there's crime, there's all these things going on in the world. You're God. Why don't you do something about this? Well, God was quiet that entire day, and the next day when the guy goes into his backyard, God's waiting. He says, I did do something. I made you. And that's participating in our creation, being co-creators with God with what's going on. And the other one, just real quick, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, it's a basic story that a lot of people get. And it's about this child is walking down the beach and he's throwing these little sand dollars back in the ocean. You know how you see some of those?
Right.
And this older person walks up and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm throwing the sand dollar back in the ocean so they'll survive. He says, there's millions of these out here. What difference do you think you're going to make? And he takes the next one, throws it in. He says, I made a difference to that one.
I love that. Yeah, I've heard that before, but I always love it because that's true. Most of us get stuck on the big picture. And, it's sort of like voting, what difference does my vote have? It's not going to count. Well, yes, it does.
Yes.
And if nothing else, doing something helps. It makes a difference, whether it makes a difference to one person, to 100 people, or to a society. It doesn't matter. If we all did one thing each day to make a difference, think of how much better things would be.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, Mother Teresa used to say, do small things with great love.
Yes. An act of service. I know when most 12-step recovery programs, one of the most important things in the 12-step process is of being of service.
Yes.
So being of service is and help, thinking about others rather than ourselves, and being of service to others is a huge, important spiritual step, and it is not only just spiritual, but it actually does make a difference.
Well, this week's gospel focus in the Mass is Jesus washing the feet of the disciples, and he says, a servant is no greater than his master, and to be the greatest among these, you have to be the servant of all. And I'm paraphrasing there, and as he's washing the disciples' feet. And that's part of being that. You're being part of something that's bigger than yourself,
right?
Yet doing it with great humility.
Now, here's something I struggle with. I'm going to throw it out there. It's not necessarily, it is kind of part of what we're going to talk about tonight, but is that I am often so focused on taking care of others that I don't always take care of myself.
Yes.
So there's a balance between what we call self-care and care to others. And I will be the first to admit that I am high on the codependency scale, so I always focus on what everybody else needs first, and then whatever is left over, I'll take it.
You're one on the Enneagram. Yes, I got you. And, well, let's use it as a segue to start talking about what we want to discuss, because I think that that segues right into it perfectly, and that's taking care of ourselves, being aware of our emotional needs, and proper emotional boundaries, not just with other people, but with ourselves. So
yeah. I've got some things that I want to put out there. I discussed them on that video, which hopefully people will watch. But if they don't get a chance to watch it, I'm going to tell them right now what some of those things are. Probably the number one thing that I can tell people is take time to decompress between work and home.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if, like myself, a lot of people are working from home, so they don't have time to decompress. There is no beginning of the day. There is no commute. There is no end of the day, per se. Everything happens at home, and then you have many people who are their family members are at home, their friends, their spouses, their roommates, their partners, their children. All these people are at home, and so if I'm working from home, and I'm parenting from home, and I'm spousing from home, and I'm doing all this, then there's no separation between all of these factors. I will tell you personally that working from home has been harder than it was going into the office. I've been working probably more hours and working harder at home than I ever was working at the office. Hope my boss isn't listening right now, but it just there was a different vibe. There was separation between tasks and assignments and jobs and such. So take time to decompress. One of the ways that I decompress, and I recommend to people, and I do this on my walk, I do it while I'm actually sitting and working on the computer, is listen to your favorite music.
Yes.
And as much as possible, and I know I'm not saying completely, but avoid news and avoid social media as much as possible.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to say something in contradiction to that in a minute, because I'm going to say it's also important to stay in contact with friends and loved ones via telephone, teleconference, I'll talk about that in a minute, and social media, but limited. In other words, social media is a good way to keep connected and keep from isolating, but it can also become a negative thing, as you well know. So
yes.
It's really important to kind of keep that in check as much as possible. I don't know how many people. I know the world has all of a sudden. I know my world has all of a sudden converted to teleconference via Zoom
Yep.
or Skype, and all of those things were always there, but now we're relying on them so much more. Some people who have iPhones can do FaceTime. So I think those are ways that we can somehow stay in touch with one another, stay connected, and it's really, I think in the long run, it's really a bad thing to isolate, because that can definitely cause people to become depressed, and anybody who's dealing with substance abuse issues, it can maybe lead to relapse. People that might, and I'll get to this in a minute, but people that are depressed often sometimes think of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we want to make sure that people aren't so isolated that becomes an issue for them. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but the next thing is, and this is not always as easy as it sounds, create a private space within your home or apartment.
Yes.
Okay. Now, some people will go, well, I'm in a one-room apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't have extra space. I can't go to a different room, or I can't. All right, fine. Take turns.
Yeah.
Right? Work it out so that, okay, you know, I mean, right now I'm sitting in my kitchen. That's been my office since this all started, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a large house, and my house has kind of an open concept, so there isn't a whole lot of private space, although my wife and I have negotiated it so that she goes to a particular area and I go to a particular area, and we generally don't, you know, unless we want to, we don't cross into each other's territory, but nonetheless, it's important to create that private space, and if you can't do it physically all the time because you don't have the space to do it, then at least respect each other's privacy.
Important word there, respect.
Give each other time for privacy.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, you know, I mean, even if you got to go, I mean, nothing says you can't go out and go for a drive around the neighborhood.
Right.
Right, and that's safe. You know, leave, go somewhere, give each other some time to be by yourself.
Yes. Well, since Gabby is working part of the time from home, part of the time where at her job they have her switching back and forth, my office is usually where I do my prayer and meditation, but when she's having to use the office, I use the living room, and she knows that during that time, she's very respectful of my needing that space to do I start each day with 1 hour of prayer and meditation.
Right.
And I try to be mindful of her with the work she's doing in the office. And so, yeah, it's a matter of being considerate of one another, which is just good relationship
Right.
habits.
Right. And I mean, and yes, I mean, when we talk about it for you and I, of course, it makes perfect sense in terms of positive relationships and whatever, but here's what I know, right? We're all in a state of emergency, or we're all in a state of crisis.
Yes.
Whether we admit it or not. Some people do well in a crisis. They rise to the occasion. And other people just melt down and freak out. And so being in a crisis is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I don't know if you remember from your training, I know in my training when we talked about crisis intervention, they taught us that the Chinese symbol for crisis means two things. It means both danger and opportunity.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So you know, there is an opportunity to grow, but there's also a danger, meaning that there's a lot of stress. People can overreact. They can, they're not necessarily making good decisions. Their judgment is impaired. All of those things can happen when people are under stress. So we need to keep that in mind as we deal with each other and as we deal with what's going on out there.
Yes, domestic violence is up right now because of some of this.
Well, I'm not surprised you read my mind, because that was where I was going next. I mentioned suicide as a possible thing. People thinking of suicide. that can happen, but also because we're in closed quarters, we're around people that we're not used to being around 24/7. We've got kids at home, we've got spouses, we've got all kinds of stress. Many people are dealing with financial issues, maybe unemployment or things like that, and everybody is just on edge. And so, of course, what's going to happen, we're going to see a lot of domestic violence. I do want to say that domestic violence shelters are still open.
Yes.
And that they are taking people in, even at this point. First responders are still responding, so if one is in a situation where they're afraid or they're being hurt or afraid of being hurt, they can still call the police or other first responders. I have a number that I wanted to mention, and you can put that up if you want, or I'll just mention it. It's the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Right.
And that's 1-800 799 7233. I'll say that again. It's 1-800 799 7233. That's a national hotline, and they can connect you with shelters and other resources if you're in a situation where you are experiencing domestic violence, or if you're afraid that something like that's going to happen. You don't have to put up with it. You can get out of there. You can call first responders, or you can call that number.
Very good. Now, we have to go to our next break, but Frank is looking that up right now, and I think when we come back, he's going to find a way to post that for people watching on YouTube and Ustream. But
Good.
We do have to go to
That's
commercial
fine.
this
Can
time.
he, while he's at it, can he look at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number? Because I don't think I copied it correctly. So if he can look both of those up, it would be nice to pass on.
Well, we'll see what we can do during the commercial break. And for those listening, you're listening to Viewpoint with Father John on KCAA Radio, and our guest tonight is the one and only Dr. John Smith.
Thank you.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org, www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
I'm Pedro Pizarro, President and CEO of Edison International. Due to current conditions, many of our customers are without power. We want to assure you that our crews are working to restore power as quickly and safely as possible. For outage updates, please visit sce.com.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM. We're on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And I know you're hearing music while I'm talking, but that's okay. Frank is doing some wonderful things back there. So those of you watching on YouTube and Ustream, you can see he has posted phone numbers where you can go, the actual sites for domestic violence, and if you have some suicide prevention that you know some help that you can get on the site that he's showing. It actually has where you can click on a link if you go to this on your computer, where you can actually chat online with these folks, so you don't even have to go in to talk to them or get heard on a telephone, please get help. It's the right thing to do, and you're not betraying anybody. You're saving a life. So with that in there.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you putting that up because, those aren't the only two resources available, but since they're national, I don't know where people are, and so I don't want to give them a resource or a number that, they can't access from wherever they're listening or wherever they are. So if they're not in this particular area, they can still call that number and they'll link you up with resources that are local to your area.
Absolutely. And Frank, I want to thank you for so quickly being on the computer and getting that posted for us. I'll tell you, he is a man of multi-talents. And
he is.
The brains behind the
operation. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah.
He's an awesome guy. I appreciate him.
He's
great. Yeah.
He's okay for a musician. So
I didn't. That's not what you called him last time. Oh wait, never mind.
Now. Confession goes two ways. So that's
it does.
Good or bad.
I know things. I know things I can't reveal. That's true.
That's right. That's right. So anyhow, you were making some very important points there, and why don't we go ahead and continue on? And for those who don't know, my guest this evening is Dr. John Smith. He is the author of The Authentic Man, A Guide to Happiness and Purpose. He's also a college professor, and he's also in charge of training and education for Social Model Recovery, which is a wonderful organization.
It is. I'm really glad that I became affiliated with them, and I love what I do, and so that's a good thing. I get to do, and I'm doing right now. Not to get too far off track, but my mission is to convert darkness into light.
Amen.
That's my personal life mission, and so I am blessed with the ability to do that through my teaching work, through healing. Now I'm reaching a larger audience, being able to hopefully have an impact on them. So I'm blessed all the way around. So I just wanted to share that my life is full and complete, and I'm feeling really blessed.
Well, that's the first time I ever heard anyone be happy about being impacted, but okay, that's good. That's all right.
Okay, you went there, so I'm going to come back. At my age, I haven't had that problem. In fact, I've had the opposite, and I'm not going to say, but at my age, you just don't want to trust certain things.
That's right. Well, it could be quite cathartic, but yes, okay.
Yes.
We
so back
bicycle
back to our discussion. Two things that I think are really very important, because I don't know about you, but with this new at-home thing, everything, I can't believe that it's Thursday. It just seemed like yesterday was Monday. Everything's running together, so I'm having a hard time literally keeping track of what day of the week it is, what time it is. Everything's just out of sync. Everything's kind of, I call it discombobulated. So what I recommend as much as possible is that people maintain a schedule and a routine around sleep, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. I don't care what time it is. If you want to sleep in now that you're at home, go ahead, but just try to keep a routine. Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, eat at the same time, exercise. That's really important. I'll talk about that in a minute. Work, if you're doing work from home, set times when you start work and when you stop work, just like you did when you were going to the office. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. And I know personally, while most people are respecting that, I still get texts and calls and all kinds of stuff after my typical old-time work hours, and I get to them, I answer them, but I know personally I got that phone in front of me or the computer in front of me 24 hours a day now.
Wow.
And it's like I feel a little bit of like anxiety that if I don't respond right away, that somehow that means I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I really encourage people to set some boundaries around those things. Set a schedule, set time around sleep, set time around eating, schedule some exercise time, work time, all of those things. And with that, I think that people can get really stuck on the negative aspect of, like, the world's coming to an end, or something, something negative like that. So I think it's important for people to set a goal and create something to look forward to.
Oh, yes.
It doesn't have to be a big thing, but, if I'm looking forward to my favorite meal, or I'm looking forward to, they can even looking forward to, hooking up with a family member or seeing somebody or going back to work or whatever, but we don't know when that's going to be. So it's really hard to put a time on that, but set a goal that's within reach and look forward to something.
Well, I want to throw something in there real quick, if I may, if it doesn't disrupt you too much, because you mentioned a favorite meal. At the same time, and I think what you're saying is absolutely right on that. At the same time, it's also important that we are a little careful with our diets, because sugar is a depressant, as you know. And a lot of times we find ourselves snacking on stuff that we don't think about it because we're at home and we think, well, I'm just going to have this little thing. And if we don't keep track, particularly people like me who are diabetic, we can really put ourselves into a tailspin and wonder what happened. And we're not stupid for it. We just, because of the crisis, we find ourselves doing stuff and we don't realize that we were pounding sugar or things that seem like comfort food, but really add to depression. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I guess you're making me now feel guilty for these 2 boxes of Entenmann's fruit pies that I see sitting in front of my face.
Well,
I typically wouldn't eat in any other century, but right now those are looking really good.
Well, because I'm a giver, I'll come over and help shoulder your guilt.
I'll share the. Do you have a particular preferred hospital for your diabetic coma that you'll probably go into shortly thereafter?
Anyone that won't, whichever one won't call Gabby to tell her what I did.
She'll know.
Yeah, she always knows.
Yes. So in that vein, okay, so we set something to look forward to, and again, I mentioned earlier that we're in a state of emergency. Our mind and body is in a state, in many cases, not everybody, but in a case of fight or flight, and in that state, and this is true especially with people who may have experienced other traumas in their life. All of a sudden, this new trauma just activates all of the other ones that they're experienced maybe early on in their life.
Yes.
All of a sudden now it's like the whole Christmas tree lit up.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things we can do, I mean, obviously there's, other aspects of dealing with that stuff, but one thing that people can do right away is move. If we walk, if we exercise, it decreases the stress chemicals and it mimics fight or flight.
Yes.
Think about it for a minute. If I'm walking and moving, then my mind and body get that it's getting away from the thing that's trying to eat me.
Yes.
Okay, so it decreases those stress chemicals. If I work out, if I do push-ups, if I do weights, if I do other things, that sort of mimics fight.
Yes.
Okay, so those things, either separate or together, help to decrease and eliminate some of the stress chemicals. And as well as I do, that over time, those things build up in the body if they have no way of getting released.
Yes.
And those can cause not only psychological problems, but they can cause physical problems in the long run. And right now, people need strong immune systems. They need, everything going for them to fight this thing off. And if they're not doing things properly, then they're just making their system more susceptible to being attacked.
Right. I agree 1,000% with you. And we used to say it's not what you're eating, but what's eating you. Type thing.
Perfect. Yeah,
So
I love it.
So I agree with that. And you, as you know, with the physiological structure and part of what we're covering is with the walking as well. We also help produce serotonin and dopamine,
Yeah.
the feel-good drugs in our brain, which we need. And I believe at a certain rate, we can also produce a little bit of oxytocin, if I'm correct.
Yes, you
Oxytocin,
are.
excuse me, oxytocin.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Well,
I'm having a rush.
No,
moment.
it's easy to confuse the two. Yeah, oxytocin is the I'll call it the love chemical.
Right.
In fact, it's funny you mention that because they've done studies of people that are in love and their brain scans look very similar to people who are intoxicated with cocaine.
That's true.
Yeah. So, literally when we fall in love, we're intoxicated, and that can last up to a year, they say, which is kind of scary. But that's why we see love being, quote, blind, because people can't really see it because they're intoxicated for about 6 months to a year while they're in love.
And then they go through detox. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, they do. Or they do or they don't.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of people that, here they are 3-4 years into a relationship, and the first thing I say is, I call it, when did the milk get spoiled? When did the milk start going sour?
Right.
What was the expiration date on that relationship? And many of them will tell me, oh, I knew that right from the first couple of months, but then I stayed in it thinking that it would get better, and it didn't. So I guess that's another show we can talk about.
Well, yeah. We should come back and do a relationship show because there's a whole series of stuff in there that's so important to talk about, including to pay attention to one another because we're all changing people. And if we're still trying to be in love with the person we met, that person's gone. And
exactly.
We have to find out who we're with now.
I mean, honestly, I can say that was the thing that ended my first marriage. I won't tell you how many I've had, but you might think that I'm probably the last guy that should be talking about relationships, but maybe I'm the best guy because I can tell you what didn't work and what doesn't work, and hopefully what does work because I'm in one now and been in it for a while and seems to be working pretty good. So we'll see.
Well, Barbara DeAngelis wrote a book on marriage, and someone said, what are you doing? You've been divorced 7 times. She says, I'm telling you what doesn't work. And she was serious about that. And it was a good book. I mean, she really was very honest in it about mistakes she made in these relationships. Well, we're down to our last couple of minutes here. And
okay.
What are some final thoughts you'd like to leave the listeners with? I know we're going to have to pick this back up again on another show.
Sure. I'm sure it is. Well, one is just to say that to everybody that it's okay to take downtime or mental health time.
Yes.
In fact, I recommend it. You can't be on all the time.
That's right.
Right. And some people, especially if they're, I don't know who's out there, people that are taking care of other people that are taking care of children, people that are taking care of patients or clients, all of those things are, especially, we all take care of everybody else, and we, again, have to be able to take some downtime to just decompress, take care of ourselves, to get our needs met. And if we're not used to that, as I said earlier, most people who are in the taking care of professions have a hard time taking care of themselves.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to leave it at this, that I think of what we're told when we're on the airline and the oxygen mask drops. We have to put our own mask on before we try to help the other person put theirs on. Well, my guest this evening has been Dr. John Smith, again, the author of The Authentic Man, A Guide for Happiness and Purpose. He's always a joy to have on the show, and I've known because when I'm not able to be here, he is my official fill-in host because I trust him more than anybody to take care of the show. And
Thank you.
so thank you for again coming on. I know I had you kind of last moment, but when I saw your video, I thought it was so important. It was that I scrapped what I had put on there.
Yeah.
Well, you've been listening to Viewpoint with Father John on KCAA Radio. If no one has told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. And we'll be back with you next week. God bless.
Thank you.
KCAA Loma Linda. Listen on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM.